I have a question for you. Do you think that even today, Jesus still has a good reputation? I think the answer to that question, if we think about it, is yes. I think Jesus does have a good reputation. Now, why does that question matter? Well, because I think the church, on the other hand, may not have the best reputation. But to be fair, let's just sort of unpack that real quickly. I think it depends on who you ask. I mean, I certainly know of people who could tell you that the church saved their life, right? They were there for them when they needed them most. Now, the people, not the church building, but the church is the people were there for them, and they helped them find and follow Jesus in a spot and a time when they absolutely needed them most. I mean, even now, I think we can see that when we look around during this COVID-19 pandemic, churches many churches at least, in their communities are making an impact. They're making a difference. They're helping with volunteers in the community. They're helping with food supply for kids or for those that are in need, making a difference for the people who are a part of their local community. That's a wonderful testimony. But again, other people you may talk to may have been hurt by the church. Understandably, there are people who have terrible stories of pain and hurt and betrayal because this machine, sometimes called the church organization, have people in it who maybe have been deceived themselves, or maybe they're still lost in their own brokenness, and they end up hurting people rather than helping people, which is really the call that we're supposed to have. This is a sad truth indeed. But I think in spite of all of that, I think the question mark about reputation falls with the church. The people who say that they're Christians, the people who say that they're Christ followers. I don't think the question of reputation falls to Jesus. I think Jesus still has a great reputation even today. Would you agree? Now, the reason I think that this is important and profound is because if we open the Bible, the New Testament Gospel according to John, in chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, Jesus says this. He says, "A new commandment I give to you." He's talking to his disciples here. "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. So also love one another. And by this, all people will know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another." Now, what is so fascinating about this new commandment and this statement by Jesus for me is, even though Jesus spoke this some 2,000 years ago, it still holds true. Even though the church has made some very big mistakes over the last 2,000 years, if you've ever studied church history, there are times where we've really blown it. But even in the midst of that, it's pretty incredible that you think when Jesus says, "People will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one another," what he's saying is, if you love the way I loved, people will know that you're a follower of mine. Jesus' reputation is still stellar. And if we can model that, if we can replicate that, then I think people will be able to sort out the truth from the lie. Now, there was an early church father. His name is St. Augustine of Hippo. Hippo is in North Africa, so he's considered a North African bishop, of course. And Augustine lived in the latter part of the 4th, early part of the 5th century. And he is credited as saying, "Don't judge a philosophy based on its abuses." Now, I think a thoughtful person can understand this and agree. The church has made some big mistakes in the past and unfortunately continues to make mistakes today. But that doesn't reflect negatively on Jesus himself or his gospel. It reflects on the people doing those things incorrectly, with a fundamental misunderstanding of either Jesus, or they're doing it out of a fundamental misunderstanding of the gospel. People will know that you're my disciples if you have love for one another. What Jesus is saying is, if you love the way I loved, people will know that you follow me. So here's the question. Does your Facebook feed and your Instagram feed reflect that? Does your Twitter posts, do they reflect that? I mean, if we can love like Jesus, I honestly think that people will notice the difference. So here's the challenge. Go and be that difference today, right? In the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, how can you love like Jesus? How can you let people know that they are loved and cared for? How can they know that from you today? And the challenge is, well, then go do that today. Make that difference.